So, good afternoon. We'll start in just a minute. There's still some people coming in, so give them an opportunity to join as well. We're also still waiting for Jean-Luc. I hope he will join very soon. I'll just drop him a message while we're still waiting for maybe a minute or so. So I think it's slowly getting time that we start up. I hope you can all hear me. You can use the chat to talk to us. Otherwise, I would like it if we go through the... Perfect, thanks, Claire. Otherwise, I would like it that we go through the presentation first, and then we have hopefully plenty of time to have a conversation with about anything that you have concerns about or you would like to know more about. Please note that we are recording this session. So Camilla, if you could press record if you haven't done that already.
It's recording in my screen, so it is ready recording.
It is recording?
Yes.
Good. Sorry, now I'm going already on the slides. So today I'll do a very short welcome, and hopefully we are going to have Jean-Luc on the call in a short while. He will give you a bit of context into the overall NGI setup. If he's not going to join, then I will have the pleasure of doing that as well. And I will do not as good a job as Jean-Luc will, but I will try my best. After that, I will give you an overview of the NGI Pointer project, in particular our open call number 2, and what we're looking for and what we've already funded. So you have a bit of context what that looks like. And then after that, I will hand over to Claire, who will give you a little bit more information about how to apply for funding. So more about some of the rules, the platform, and the processes that we have in place that you can also find in, of course, the guide for applicants, for instance, and the other material that we have made available for the call. Please use the chat. If you have any questions, we'll pick them up on the way, or we pick them up afterwards, depending on where they fit best. And I think we'll also leave the video off unless you'd like to see me, then I can turn my video on. But I think if we all turn on our videos, then we will have a problem. So now you should also be able to see me. Good. So let's maybe just say welcome to the people that are on the call that are involved in the project. So we have Camilla, who's helping me at Aarhus University. Hi, Camilla.
Hello.
We have Claire from Funding Box. Hi, Claire.
Hi, everyone.
And I think that's all my colleagues here. And we don't have Jean-Luc. So then that's the last person is then me for now. Hopefully Jean-Luc will still join. My name is Mirko Presser. I'm the coordinator of the NGI Pointer project. I work formerly at Aarhus University as an associate professor in a department called Business Development and Technology. And we've been running NGI Pointer now for a little bit over 1 year. We started January 2020. And we had our first call that closed 1st of June, as far as I remember. And so the first cohort of about 24 projects almost have now started and are in the process of working now for 1 year or 12 months or thereabouts to complete their activities. And we'll talk about those projects a little bit later. Jean-Luc, have you arrived? No. Okay, so then I'll give you a little bit of context about NGI as a whole. So the Next Generation Internet initiative started now, I would say 3 years ago or so, with a study that looked at how Europe should position itself in this development of the internet overall. And a small funding initiative was created by the Commission to pathfind what the mission should be based on the study, as well as several coordination and support actions that engaged with a variety of communities to figure out how to position ourselves. And there's clearly still sort of a split between the ways that we can facilitate this. So specifically, we have a dimension where we're looking more at a commercial angle, where we're looking more at applications and services that should be created based on an internet, an existing internet or an internet that is evolving. And on the other hand, there is a drive to actually changing the fabric underneath the applications and services of the that are supported by the internet in a new way. What both of those dimensions have in common is that we have this human aspect to it. So a more human-centric way of working with the internet. What we mean with this is, as a central theme, you have this concept of trust, which is also represented often through privacy or security mechanisms. But this can be embedded, let's say, in how you are treating data, how you are working with protocols and mechanisms, or how you're creating applications and services in general. So you have a portfolio of now, I think it's 9 projects that are funding through open calls activities in the NGI context. And NGI Pointer is now one of those projects. There's always new ones, or there have been just recently new ones coming in, also creating open calls. There are some that are finishing off with a final open call now. But you can see a very large portfolio covering anything from identity and trust to privacy and security mechanisms. In particular, also ledger technologies are addressed. And then you have NGI Pointer, who fits in this picture as an initiative that specifically looks at internet architecture renovation. So this is looking at protocols, mechanisms, and tools that make up the internet and how we can change certain aspects of it. So this was my very poor overview of NGI as a whole. If you want, you can go to ngi.eu. So I'll put that into the chat. If you want to get a more wide overview of the portfolio of projects that are running there, and more context on the mission of NGI as a whole. This specifically is about NGI Pointer and the open call number 2 that has launched on the 1st of February and that will close on the 1st of April. So in about 1 month and 7 days. A little bit of an overview of the project. We have 7 million euros in the project, of which 5.6 are reserved for bottom-up projects, or these projects that you are looking for applying to. And of that 5.6 million, there's about 2.5 million left. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on how the first cohort of projects is working. So this is a little bit of a moving number, but of course, by the time that we are evaluating the projects that are coming in on Open Call 2, we will know exactly how much we can spend, and we will, of course, spend all of that money. So meaning this is the last open call that we have in NGI Pointer, unless there's some drastic other external events happening where we make changes to that. But for now, we expect that this is the last open call for NGI Pointer. Very important is we are funding third-party projects with a scope of internet architecture, web components, tools, and methods. We are deliberately quite vague about it. We have a work program with the topics that are listed here on the right-hand side, which is very broad. These are not topics that you address specifically. These are more challenges and ideas that should give you inspiration of how you could fit into the program. But we are very, very blue sky. We're very open to suggestions. We're very open to working also specifically to your needs. So we have a customized mentoring program where we try to respond to your needs and try to offer you a good service in fulfilling your own projects. We are not looking for the typical application or service that sits on top of the internet. Now, if you want to be a stickler, you could say that email and a browser, as well as maybe the web itself, are applications. But we see this as core applications, and we do fund activities under this context if there are interesting protocols involved. So for instance, we are funding, as you will later see, an email client or an email ecosystem, you could say, but it's specifically using JMAP. Or we're also funding communication architectures, infrastructures, and you could say that is using, as an example, IPFS. So we're looking for also adoption of certain protocols that we find interesting as mobilizing new ideas around internet architecture. So blue sky, bottom-up projects. We have completed one open call, second open call launched on the 1st of February, and we're closing 1st of April, 2021. On the right-hand side, you see the topics. You can find those in the work program, and there's a link to the work program coming a little bit later, but you can always find it at ngipointer.eu, or the link below, pointer.ngi.eu also works. You can find a little bit of inspiration for the specific topics there. I've highlighted in this presentation the topic of energy efficiency. This is something that we find very interesting and very important. It's a small prioritization will happen to projects that address energy efficiency, but it's not a prioritization over other topic. It's more, if you're ranked at the same place in the evaluation, then energy efficiency will get a slight prioritization over other topics. But this is really, you know, at the very bottom cutoff, this is where this would count. So I wouldn't take this now as we want only energy efficiency applications. That's not true. We just say that we have a slight prioritization to that. And you will see examples of other topics that we're covering in a few slides later on. So what are we looking for, or who are we looking for? So we are referring to these people as NGI architects. And we feel that these persons are immensely important to us. So we're generally looking for somebody who has a private mission, or who is part of an organization or a business that has a mission of improving how we are working or how the internet is working specifically. So we're looking for organizations or natural persons that are European-based, researchers, developers, hackers, internet activists, working in a startup or working in SME at the university, maybe even a larger company, although we haven't seen that so far yet. So it's really any person who has an interest in improving the way that we are working and experiencing the internet through its underlying architecture and web components, tools, and methods. So this is also the scope, and the scope is enormously important that you are hitting that one very well. So there are other NGI projects, sister projects and brother projects that we have that are addressing topics that cover applications and services, that are more startup focused, for instance, that have a stronger sense of, for instance, data or data portability or identity. Although we do fund some of those activities, we would like you that you specifically apply to the topics that those projects cover and come to the NGI Pointer project when you're looking at architectural issues, protocols, web components, tools, and methods like I described up there. So the scope, we will use the scope to look at the set of projects that we want to evaluate. So this will be presented a little bit later by Claire, who will show you the process of where we are looking at scope and minimum quality criteria to look if we want to pass those projects on to an independent evaluation. So you need to pass the scope, or you need to be within the scope of what NGI Pointer is calling for, which admittedly is very broad, so it's a very difficult thing to pin down. And you need to also fulfill at least one minimum quality criteria that we have listed here below. And that needs to be also a significant contribution, not just sending a link saying that I've contributed to an open source project. But for instance, that the open source project that you're referring to in your minimum quality criteria is also related to the application that you make, or is proving that you have a good track record in it. And in particular, we're looking at uptake of open source projects, so that there are people using your code in one way or another way. There's a question now specifically about open source. So what do you mean by open source? Individual projects or group-based projects, private commit, for example, sets of open source components made by students supervised count. Generally, I would say yes, that counts. So we have, as you will later see, very large scale projects. So,
oh, yeah, I don't know.
So I think that was just somebody unmuted for a second. So we have very large scale projects, like for instance, we are making a contribution to Scion. We're making also a contribution to Solid, as well as other projects that are running for longer periods of time. But they're very well described components that they are seeking funding for. So yes, you can be part of a larger scale open source project and use this in your minimum quality criteria, that there have been contributions made, or that you're associated with it, as long as then your project underneath is very specific about the contributions that you're making using NGI Pointer funding. I hope that answers your question, Antonio. So we're also looking for experience contribution. That's bad language, but experience contributing to internet architecture community. What we're meaning here is that, for instance, you have contributed to an RFC at the IETF, or you have been at meetings, at other standardization meetings, or made other contributions in this context. This can be a very wide-ranging list of experiences that you can provide here, but there needs to be clear evidence that you've been active there, not just send an email or have one reference somewhere, but we want to see the evidence of the activity that has been, that you've had in this area. And the final point is scientific publications in the internet architecture fields. So this is a peer-reviewed journal or a good conference publication in a relevant area that was made by the person that is applying, or by the person that is contributing to the application. And the publication should be also related to the field, or maybe even the specific project that you're applying for. So there needs to be a direct relationship to that. So one of those three you need to meet, and they need to be of good quality, that we will accept that as a minimum quality criteria to be fulfilled. Also, what we're looking for is we're looking for projects that create impact. So we're not looking for projects that are really beautifully shelved in a Bitbucket or in a publication or a white paper or some PowerPoints. We're looking at working code that other people can pick up. So something that's demonstratable. A demonstratable internet architecture renovation is a piece of software code that is available for other people to use and that makes sense for other people to use. So it's an open source contribution and it can have a standardization and or rollout potential. So we're not expecting that you all run to W3C or IETF and try and standardize your protocol or mechanism, but that you maybe have a plan of a wider rollout or uptake. And 2 out of those 3 you should also be describing in your application. So we're looking for something that's workable, running code. That's really what the core of this is, and that it's useful and open for other people to use. So this is probably one of the more important slides when you apply for our open call to meet those criteria. So the scope is immensely important. We do not want the typical application service running on top of something. We do accept email, browser, web, of course, but not an application or a wider platform or something like this. There we have trouble with finding the scope to be relevant. But the problem is I can't eliminate everything because you might surprise us with something that is really not within the scope of other NGI projects, and that fits the NGI vision extremely well. So please talk to us if you're in doubt. We're always happy to answer your questions on that. So what is probably the best way to find out if you have a good chance of receiving funding through NGI Pointer is to look at what we had as projects in the open call #1. So you can find on the link that I have here in the slides. So NGI, so pointer.ngi.eu, NGI-architects, and I will of course also make the slides available later on our website, so you can go there as well. We have 8 categories of projects that we funded, and I'll go into more detail later on. So core internet applications, like I said, email client, a browser. We have a project on identity. We have projects, or at least one project on virtualization. The majority of projects are in this layer 2, layer 3 context, transport and network layer, with an overlap into security. So it's not always easy to say which category you're part of, but this is probably the bulk of the projects that we're looking at. We have one tool that's tracking Linux regression. Then we have what we're calling this privacy by design communication protocol suite. These are more stacks, or you could even call them platforms, but they're very specifically using a set of protocols that are very interesting, like IPFS, for instance. And then finally, you have this idea of new ideas and paradigms, we called it, something where we can't really class it. Usually they're part of larger projects. So what we have here is, for instance, Scion and Solid. So a bit more specific, this is the full list of projects. You can find the full list, including descriptions, on this URL down here. So there is a description of 22 out of the 24 projects that we've so far engaged with. And maybe to pick out a few interesting ones, we're funding, for instance, 2 projects on multipath TCP, slightly different how they are built up. One of them is very active in the transport group at the IETF. Sorry, that's some congestion experience, actually, not the multipath TCP. We have projects, for instance, on open source hardware as well. So we have Carusa that is working with wireless optical communication systems. We have a a decentralized end-to-end encrypted and trustless protocol, which is Pyrgos. So this is, it feels more like a platform or a system that uses IPFS as a foundation. Yeah, so you can see sort of there's really a huge mix out of different types of projects that we are looking at and providing funding for, but they all sit at a foundational layer of the internet, and are very open source focused, and provide a new way of creating one mechanism within the architecture. So what do you get from this? We offer projects up to 200,000 euros. This is a lump sum funding. So Claire knows a lot more about these mechanisms, and she can answer questions on that specifically. But we have certain rules how what you can get in funding. So the maximum is 200,000. For one single individual, it's 50,000, but they can also join as teams. So a team of 4 could also get a maximum of 200,000 euros. The projects are up to 12 months. So we need to be quite strict on the open call number 2. So the timeline is roughly that the call closes, of course, 1st of April, but then the evaluation happen, and we get the acceptance, contract signatures, and so on. So the projects will probably start around September, let's say. This means we have around about 12 months from then to finish the projects, because our project will then also finish in 2022 in December. So we need some time to close the reporting, close all the projects, and so on. So it is a 12 months program, but it's very much customized to your needs. So we usually generate 4 milestones that correspond to 4 payments in the project. These milestones, the first one is setting up the project. So this is creating an individual mentoring plan, doing an ethical check, as well as coming to the kickoff meeting, or virtually being at the kickoff meeting, depending how the situation is in the autumn. And after that, the milestones are more focused on the type of features that you are trying to develop within your projects. And these are then customly defined and worked with. One question regarding what you said of individuals. Antonia, I think we take that one later after Claire has presented, if that's okay with you. Considering now, we have the work program, and you have a link to the work program here at the bottom. We have these 8 topics that we are going about, the last topic being completely open one, of course. Like I said earlier on, these are just ideas. They are things that you might want to work with. They're not specific things that we're calling for. We're not funding one per topic. If it so happens, we would fund all under one of these topics or none of these topics. These are just for inspiration and giving you context of how to start. So as an example, for instance, this is one of them. It's a limitation in the TCP/IP protocol suite. So when TCP/IP came to life, many of the applications and services that the internet is now supporting, or these protocols are now supporting, weren't imagined at the time. Also with the increased type of data traffic that we're having, the various new types of data traffic like machine to machine or autonomous systems, TCP/IP might not be the optimal solution anymore, or there are significant limitations that we need to take into consideration. So this could be an inspiration to work and feel that your project fits into that context or scope. Another example, and this was the one that I said was one of our highlights or interests in particular for this open call, but not exclusive. I can only highlight that again as well, is energy efficiency. And what we're meaning here is that there has been, of course, an increase in energy consumption through ICT in general. And there are mechanisms that we can make more energy efficient. There are behaviors that we can nudge to be more energy efficient. But we also fundamentally need to understand what the energy consumption is of certain things. So I don't remember his name, but I think he was a Harvard professor who once said that a Google search would consume the equivalent of boiling a cup of coffee or something like this. So these are economists that look into those inner workings. But I think we need to have new metrics and new understandings of also how to measure this energy consumption and quantify it in some way so we get a good grasp of it. So again, this is a very open and interesting topic where we also invite you for contributions to think about energy efficiency or greening the internet as a topic. And I think with this, I would like to just stop with my part of the presentation and invite you for applying. So deadline is the 1st of April, and you probably might wonder why we're having a stormtrooper here, but of course this is Finn, so it's not evil at all. He's part of the good ones. And I hope you will find that NGI Pointer will also provide you a platform for your projects to carry them on or to finally get you to work on something that has been bugging you for a long time or a dream that you want to fulfill. So thank you very much. And the only question that I think we have outstanding is Antonio's, which I think we will cover when we get there with Claire's presentation. So thanks, Antonio. Could I ask Claire to take over from me?
Yes. Shall I share my screen or do you have the presentation? I can share the screen.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Host disable participant screen sharing.
I need to enable you to share.
Can you see my screen? No.
No, I need to upgrade you.
You need to, yeah.
Let me have a look if I can do this. I can put you in the waiting room, but I can't make you a co-host. Camilla, can you make a co-host out of Claire?
I can try. Let me see. Yes.
Okay, now you should be able to.
Looks like it. Yes. All right, here we are. Fantastic. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you, Mirko. I'm Claire from Funding Box, one of the partners, and we're largely responsible for managing the open calls. And I'll take you through a couple of processes. There is going to be some repetition. So as you know, of course, we have the open call running. We've got a deadline for the 1st of April at 5 o'clock Brussels time. Most of you have probably already started applying. I imagine most of you have arrived at our landing page for the open call, which is what you see here in the screenshot, in this image. So the next thing that I really want to emphasize is the documents that Mirko mentioned earlier. So it's really, really crucial that all of you familiarize yourselves with the guide for applicants. It is considered to be the Bible for the open calls. It has all the information you need about how to address the scope, how to be eligible. You get information about the timeline, about the evaluation process. So there's really all the information you need in there. You can find this document on the landing page of the open call. And together with that, we've provided a frequently asked questions document, which is a living document where we add commonly asked questions. So these two documents should really help you in getting started with your application. On top of that, we've also provided a template for the sub-grant agreement, which is the contract that is signed between yourselves, if you're successful, and the consortium. And it basically outlines the terms and conditions for the funding. So if you've got some time, I would recommend you take a look at that as well to familiarize yourselves with the terms and conditions should you get selected for funding. Okay, so now I'll take you through the application process, which is very straightforward and won't take any time at all. As I've mentioned, you probably have already started an application. For those who haven't, you'll find this useful, I hope. Essentially, you'll be taken to a list of sections that you need to fill out. As you can see from this image, we're asking very standard questions. We're asking for some basic information. We're also asking for legal information, which involves information about your the applicant and the company, if you're applying as an organization, or your personal details if you're applying as a natural person, so as an individual. Then we ask you for some information on your project, and then we come to the eligibility minimum quality criteria, which is what Mirko was emphasizing earlier. So this is key to understand, because if you are not in scope and if you do not demonstrate that you tick 1 on 3 of those minimum quality criteria, you will not pass to the external evaluation. So really do understand what the requirements are and make sure you really demonstrate strongly how you have experience in these areas. Following that, we have 3 very standard sections. If you're familiar with Horizon 2020, these are not new to you at all. We've got excellent impact and implementation. So there again, we ask you for some specifics about your project. And then after that, we've got some general questions concerning statistics and some statements and processing of personal data. So this process is fully online. It's very straightforward, as I mentioned. You can continue to edit even after you complete the application and submit, as long as you do that before the deadline. And on top of that, you can also add a contributor. So if you want to split the work when you're developing the application, you can also add a contributor to help you out with that. Another thing I want to highlight is in the application form, we give you the opportunity to upload a supporting document. Now, the supporting document is exactly that. It is supporting your statements in the application form. The external evaluators will be evaluating the application form. They will consider your supporting documents, but it is not the prime application form. So use it to demonstrate some additional information to support your main argument, to strengthen your main argument, but you should not use it as an opportunity to extend the application form. Remember that the most important information needs to go in the application form. Now I'd like to talk a bit about the evaluation process. I think this is quite important for you to understand how we will be evaluating your application. Again, there's going to be some repetition here. As I mentioned, there's the call deadline on the 1st of April. Once the deadline arrives, we will check for your eligibility. There are 2 layers of eligibility. The first one is that you need to submit by the deadline, of course. You need to have submitted the application in English, not in any other language. You need to be from specific countries. The eligible countries in this case are member states, associated countries, and the UK. And once we do that, and you've passed the basic eligibility check, we will then evaluate the minimum quality criteria. Once again, if you pass that, you'll move on to the expert evaluation, which is where you'll have 2 external independent evaluators evaluating your application. Okay, you'll have two evaluators evaluating each application. And then after that, the evaluation committee, which comprises of the 4 partners in NGI Pointer, will evaluate the ranking. Okay, so there will be points assigned to each application following the external evaluation. And depending on your ranking, we will evaluate which projects will be receiving funding. Again, very much dependent on the available budget left over from after the first open call. Okay. Of course, those who have been will be successful will be contacted, and we will then kick off the sub-grant agreement process, where you'll be signing a contract between the consortium and yourselves. And then we will invite you to the welcome event, which is when we kickstart the program, the support program. Of course, those who do not make it will also receive an email with the information from the external evaluation. Same goes for those who don't pass the eligibility check. They will receive notification that they haven't passed and will not be going to the next stage. Mirko, feel free to jump in if you.
Yeah, I think that was very clear. I think it's very important to see the minimum quality criteria and the scope in this
yes, on the scope
evaluation before we go to the external evaluation. And the reason why we have to have this in there is that we in the first open call received a very large number of applications. And we needed to make sure that only those within the scope and of high enough quality would go to the external evaluation, because the external evaluation is again a paid process, and we need to have a measured response, I think is the Commission's terminology here, for the grants that we're giving out. So this is the reason why we have that additional step there as well.
Yes, exactly. So hopefully that clarifies the process for you. There are a number of steps. It is a competitive call, but it is definitely a very exciting journey, especially if we're funding some very exciting projects, as we're doing with the first open call. So I'm coming towards the end of my presentation. As I mentioned, the application process is very straightforward. We expect you to take about a day to a day and a half to fill it out. Of course, you've got plenty of time left. There's about a month left until the deadline, so there's no rush there. You can also export your application. You can delete your application. And this is important because if you've accidentally created 2 applications, we will only accept 1 application from you. So 1 application per applicant, and only the last application will be considered. So make sure that before the deadline you check to see that there's only 1 application and it is the correct application that you are submitting. Lastly, once you fill out all the sections of the application form, you will be prompted with a Submit Now button. And of course, you have to click that button. If you don't click Submit Now, we will not be able to evaluate your application because you would not have submitted. And that is all. I just want to highlight that, of course, we will have time for questions and answers now, but we do have a help desk, which you can use after this, which is the email that you see here. And we also have a community for the NGI project, as well as for NGI Pointer itself, where you can ask your questions and answers and interact with other members in this community. So I've left the link here in case you want to join. And I think that is all from me. So I'll hand the presentation, the rights back to Mirko.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Right. So we have Antonio, who asked a question earlier on about individuals. Antonio, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yes, thank you, Mirko. Nice to meet you all. I have several questions regarding what kind of team can participate in the call, if you are open to teams of people, if collaborators can only be in one of the proposals, so the teams have to be completely independent. All these kind of questions.
Okay, I think on the first question, we have funded individuals, we funded teams of individuals, and we funded organizations that are going alone, and we funded consortia of more than one organization. So these are the constellations that we have. I think the biggest team that we have of individuals is 4 or 5 individuals. I don't know exactly.
5.
5. And they
Okay.
split them up, and not a single individual can have more than 50,000. We can also not give more than 200,000 per organization, even if the organization is in one or two proposals.
Nico, sorry, but yeah, it's not clear to me the difference between an organization and an individual. I mean, for example, I'm a professor at a university. Mm-hmm. If the organization proposes a project, several people of the organization can participate, and the organization can ask for another project.
This is, I think, where it gets difficult for me to answer that question. So if you apply as your university, then you're applying as an organization, and anybody within that university can work on that project. But as far as I understand, in NGI Pointer, that one organization cannot get more than 200,000 euros. So if you apply for two projects of 100,000 euros each, theoretically, you could get both of those accepted.
Okay, so you need some kind of coordination inside the organization.
If the organization is large enough, I think there might be other rules, but maybe Claire, you can answer that one.
So what you're proposing is the university would participate as an organization together with an individual from that same organization, or did I misunderstand?
Yeah, my point is we have different departments, so I cannot control what other department will do.
Right. In theory, we are looking to fund one application per organization. We're not looking for multiple applications per organization. And we haven't seen that yet, Mirko. We haven't seen any, we haven't seen multiple applications from the same organization. Again, I'm not sure how many. Go ahead.
I think we need to ask that question to the Commission, because I know that
we could, yeah.
I think our call has one specific rule, which is no more than 200,000 per organization. And but I know that there are rules about large organizations that like universities, where there could be multiple departments that are not coordinated, like you said, Antonio. So we'll ask that question to the Commission.
Okay.
And we will put it into the frequently asked questions. Would that be fair, Claire?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
And another question related to this. My organization has already a project from the call one.
Yeah.
Is this a problem?
That would be a problem, yes. I will ask that question, and I think that applies to that part as well.
But in the same way, we can apply as 4 individuals, for example.
Yes.
Yes.
Then you're a different organization or a different legal entity.
No, will be the same organization because it's a university, but it's 4 individuals.
Yeah, but you would
you're operating in your own capacity.
Exactly.
Okay.
We'll clarify this anyway, just to get a clear picture.
The newer calls are different. They don't have that rule. We have an explicit rule in the call text that states that we can't give out more than 200,000 per organization. But again, it might not apply to large organizations. But I think we need to move on. So there's Peter who asked, so he's working in NGI Ledger, if he can receive NGI Pointer funding and connect the initiatives. Yes, we have that case in our existing portfolio that somebody has received Ledger funding or other NGI funding. And we're usually checking with the project if your grant has been fulfilled. And if that has been fulfilled, you can receive a new grant. That is possible. I hope that answers your question, Peter.
Yes, we're still in the middle of this, but I see that there are lots of other NGI projects basically where we have to connect to basically, and that we cannot do from the project we are in, because that has to be limited. Otherwise we can't make deliverables there. So I see a lot of connections, and I think it is also relevant for other NGI projects. but they are not picked up because everybody's working on their own project. So there is no linkages between them. And I think Pointer could be one of the programs in particular to do that, to exactly make those linkages possible. But then it has to happen also now, because all these projects are running now.
I think it's actually a really good point that you're addressing. It's something that we also internally try to talk about across the different projects and also with the CSAs. And I mean, the NGI program comes out of the same unit that also provided us with a much more strict way of looking at it. So FIware, which was pulled up in a different way. And I think, you know, this new program is trying to be much more open and loose and loosely connected. But I think an initiative like yours could be interesting, Peter. I'm not sure if it's specifically an NGI pointer issue that we need, that is to be addressed, or if it's something that we need to address at the program level. But I think I would be interested to seeing something or talking to you further.
Yeah, I would like to follow up that up, please, because I think the time is now very good. And I think if we tune it a little bit only with what was already running, it should be possible, I think, just trying to connect the right people with each other.
Yeah. I mean, I put my email into the chat anyways, just in case that somebody wants to get in touch with me and talk some stuff through. They're always welcome to do that, including you, of course, Peter.
Thanks. I will do that. Thank you.
So Jana asked if the application is, so the supporting document will be evaluated as well. Yes, but it is such that it isn't a supporting document. So in the web forms that you're filling out, you can't, for instance, put an Excel arc or you can't put a graphic in there. So the supporting document can be just that. It could be a PDF of a graphic or an architecture or an illustration in some way or another that you otherwise couldn't provide to us. So if you then reference that properly in the text in the application forms, saying see figure 1 in the supporting document, that I think is the best way of using the supporting document. And of course it will be evaluated as well. But it's not the primary document to evaluate. We often see that people provide a full proposal as a supporting document of 10 pages or so, which is top to bottom written. We don't want to see that. That is not what the intention is for that document. Maybe one more comment to the earlier discussion about an existing or a university that has already received funding, organization that has already received funding from NGI. We have had a key performance indicator from the Commission stating that this is a program that is trying to attract new actors into the European Commission's programs overall. So the KPI was for newcomers to join the organization or to join NGI overall. With time, of course, that's becoming more and more difficult because more and more people have already participated in NGI. So we see that we have graduates from other programs applying to NGI Pointer, and NGI Pointer graduates hopefully also applying to other programs to continue their good work. So that will, of course, happen more and more. But we do welcome complete rookies that have never applied for European funding to participate here. This is really a very low barrier to entry, we hope. I know we have certain obligations that we roll over to our projects that we're trying to fund, but we're trying to make that as easy as possible and help you as much as possible to go through the process. Antonio, you said 2 organizations can go together in a consortium. Yes, so if you have, so we have, for instance, the Scion project is 2 organizations. It's a startup or an SME called Anapaya and ETHZ, both being inside that consortium receiving 200,000 or almost 200,000 euros. And they have then made an agreement of how they split this up. And this is encoded into what we call the individual mentoring plan, so that we can also see that there's a fair division of labor and why they're participating and so on. Mohammed, you're asking if UK organizations can participate. Claire, I think you mentioned that associate countries and the UK.
Yes, the UK are also eligible. Yep.
Yep. And I've had a message that Jean-Luc will be ready in 5 minutes. He unfortunately got the timing wrong by 1 hour. But we have another webinar tomorrow, which we will also record, and I will make sure that Jean-Luc will be there for that session, so you can also listen to his part of the other recording then as well. At least that's the plan. So do you have any more questions to us, or would like to give a shout out? Antonio asked if UK will get funding. Yes. Unless they're doing something weird, you know, it's we don't know. No, it's under the agreement, Claire, right? So
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, the interesting thing about the situation when we're working on internet architecture is that it's without boundaries. You know, it's supposed to be something that is a global infrastructure, and it shouldn't matter where and how we're working with our colleagues. So we've had requests of working with colleagues in Japan or colleagues in the US in particular. You can still work and mention those colleagues in those projects. They just don't receive funding. So that's unfortunate how the program works in this context. Claire, do you have anything else you'd like to mention?
No, I think there's another question.
One question. So, are you from the 5 Gig Center? I used to. Yes. Rahim Tafazoli was my supervisor.
Exactly. So I'm just thinking about to come up with a practical solution, or no? I mean, the practical join with theoretical one.
Yeah.
So I was engaging here a lot.
Yeah. So we are looking for working code.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Send my regards to Rahim if you talk to him. So I think we're drying up on the question side, and we're hitting the hour mark. So that's not bad timing. Camila, do you have anything you would like to say? I mean, we're going to wrap up the recording. I think we leave the Q&A in there as well. I think that's quite useful. Unless anybody has an objection to that, who's on the call. And it will be made available via the NGI.eu website. I think via the YouTube channel that we have in the NGI initiative. Isn't that right, Claire?
Yep, correct.
Some of you, maybe not all of you, have filled out the questionnaire or the little survey that we had to start this up. We have also some details there, but I don't think we're using that further than only double checking the invites that we've made. So I think with this, I would like to thank everybody for joining. I think it was a very good session. I hope you will apply, of course, with an immensely exciting topic and project. And we're looking forward to seeing that.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.